We are talking Pavel Dorofeyev, Mike Sullivan, the Vincent Trocheck trade, and even a little fantasy hockey.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1605 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who is hitting a home run this MLB season. Very special episode of Locked On New York Rangers for you guys here today. The everydayers are well aware of this. It's become an annual tradition here on Locked On New York Rangers. The winner of last season's Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy Hockey League, Mr. Travis Moul, going to be joining me in just a second here. We are talking all things Rangers, everything from the Pavel Dorofeyev acquisition to, the drafting of Albert Smith's, Mike Sullivan's performance in year one, and a whole lot of other stuff as well. Also going to obviously let Travis brag at least a little bit about his fantasy win from this past season. So without any further ado, enjoy. All right, so with no further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our very special guest for today's show, the 2025-2026 Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy League champion, Mr. Travis Moul. And Travis, obviously quite the run you had this past season, winning a 20-team fantasy league. That's no joke. The first question I have for you, I got to ask about the team name, the Pennsylvania Punishers.
Yeah.
We were talking, through email a little bit, but basically it sounds like you live between Philly, Pittsburgh, and DC. So I got to know, man, as a Ranger fan, first of all, how have you stayed loyal to our blue shirts? And what is that like constantly being surrounded by Penguins fans and Flyer fans?
Yeah. And the Cavs fans too. As you know, it's tough to stay loyal at times, but I always have. For whatever reason, my dad got me into hockey, and then that was kind of it for our relationship. When I was 10 years old, and I'm 49 now. So that's the reason I watch hockey now. But as far as the teams that I like, my uncles were a big influence on that. And football wise, one uncle was a Steelers fan, the other one was the Redskins, now Commanders fan. And I always felt that weird pressure, to a lot of people do. If you grow up near or in the city, sure, you're gonna like that team. But I kind of grew up in the middle of nothing, so I wanted to pick some random teams. You might see a Seahawk flag behind me. And in baseball, I like the Athletics. And for some reason, in the late 80s, I picked these random teams. I think it was John Van Beesbrook for me. I knew that I wanted to focus on the goalies and then eventually become a goalie like I was. So I think it was just watching Beezer then. And then when Richter came in, Richter's my favorite all time, I think. So I think it was just watching the goalies in there, and I just stuck with the teams. But whichever teams I stuck with in 1988 or whatever the year was, I started kind of watching sports. That's where it came from. Yeah.
Gotcha. I didn't know you were a Seahawks fan, man. I'm actually a Niner fan, so we'll agree to disagree when it comes to football. Yep. They've certainly had some battles, but I figure, we'll let you go ahead, talk a little bit about your fantasy win. We'll get into some Ranger stuff a little bit later in today's episode. I got to ask you about this. So you had the best record in the regular season in the fantasy league. I looked this up today, 133, 79, and 30. That's about the best record as anyone's ever had in this league. And a little bit of a scare in the first round, but you went 5-5-1 against the number 8 team, and you won by the tiebreaker. 7-3-1 in the semis, 7-3-1 in the finals. I mean, did you feel like you had it all the way? I mean, you had a heck of a team, but it got a little bit dicey, at least in the first round there.
Yeah, I knew I knew from the draft in the beginning I wanted to have category coverage, which explains why I looked at this again too, which explains why I got Dylan Holloway in the 4th round, and then somehow Connor Bedard in the 5th, which sounds completely strange now, but I wanted those guys. I'm thinking Cooley must have already been gone because I wanted that kind of guy that can give you the banger stats as well as put a couple in the net with it. So either Cooley was gone or I took a chance on Holloway anyway, but I knew I wanted that and not to shut any categories out completely and not worry about it. So that's something where I think it kind of spread out. And I used to be a complete nerd and keep spreadsheets on I'm winning this category and that category in different sports and baseball, and where do I need to trade for based on the stats. And now I kind of just more eyeball it and say yeah, I feel like I need a little bit more of this and that, but it's all about that balance kind of finding all the categories and not kind of shutting anything out.
Yeah, it's tough. Do you attack one category and kind of punt on the other one, or do you try to make it as balanced as possible? There's definitely a lot of strategy. And speaking of strategy, I feel like in this league, And it makes sense because there's 20 Ranger fans in this league.
Yep.
Nobody ever wants to draft Sidney Crosby, right? Like he always, I know he's getting up there a little bit, but he's still a great player, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up taking him, I believe, let me see, what do I have here? The third round at number 48 overall.
Yeah, 48.
Were you planning on Crosby, or was it one of those things where you didn't really want to take him, but he's there, so I got to take him? Like, just kind of, if you can remember, how did that all go down?
No, I know, like, I don't remember specifically. I remember I was sitting out back on my back portion when we did this draft. But other than that, I just kind of like know that I was just going with best player available at spots, unless I had to cover some positions and everything like that. Because I went, with having Igor first and then Dahlin in the second, I knew I had to go with a forward then, as that's coming back around. And when you're in the middle of the draft, I was 8th. You had that long time to come. You don't have the back-to-backs. So you play that chess match mostly with yourself there, just on anticipating what it was. But it was best forward available. And, I do a lot of dynasty leagues. Well, I do one main dynasty league. That's my main focus. So I probably wouldn't have done that there. I might have found something different there that's going to give me. But as far as a 1-year payoff, like I would do that again. I think Fox went right after him, though. Or somewhere, Fox went right after one of my picks, though. So I did kind of push Fox away. But that would have given me, if that was the case, if he did go 49, I would have taken 2D then. I would have had 2D and a goalie, and then my forwards would have been that much worse off.
True. Yeah. I mean, at that point, you probably have to take a forward. It's funny because there was one year, might have been the year before this one, but like Crosby was lingering, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to hear the end of it if I take Crosby. And then I think like 1 or 2 picks before I was up, someone got me off the hook there by taking him. But I mean, look, you got to do what you got to do. And if he can help your team, you can help your team.
Yep.
Now you mentioned Igor a minute ago. Wanted to ask about that. You were picking number 8 overall. And just to go through the list here, this is how our draft went last year. It was McDavid, McKinnon, Hellebuck, Matthews, Makar, Brady Tkachuk, Ottinger, and then Igor goes number 8 to you. I mean, was Igor always your choice? Would you have considered one of those other guys if they were hanging around, or did you have to go get, the Ranger goalie there?
Yeah, I'll spoil it for the rest of the league if they're listening. I'll take Igor anywhere in those top 20 picks, especially now winning the championship last year. If I get number 1 overall, and that's just because I want to watch the guy. He's my favorite player to watch now. I was a goalie, growing up and everything. So I want to watch him, and he's the one I'm going to root for the most. He's the hardest one for me to root against if somebody else would have him. So I only did 3 leagues last year, but I did as many as like 7 in the recent years, and I want to have him like in every league. He's the guy I want to have. Like, I hate to play against him in like fantasy because I'm never going to root against the guy in any capacity whatsoever. Right. So I was going to take him, and I had the kind of same mindset where I was going to take him with my first pick if I could. And then we find out relatively late, like when the pick is, and I was like 8, we'll see. And then, but my mindset was also, well, we'll see at 8 if there's any goalies taken. And with 2 taken off the board, we think Vasilevsky this year, but I guess he had more of a down year the year before, so he was a little bit later on. But you think so? Once 2 were gone, I was like, I have to. It's semi goalie run going on here in the first round. Then,
yeah. It's tough because, like, with 20 teams, like, if you wait too long, you might end up with, like, a pretty lousy goalie. I know that was an issue for me this past season. Aiden Hill clearly did not work out for me, so had to just kind of wing it after that. But I got to ask this, too, because you actually ended up with Connor Hellebuck on your team, and I think you traded for him. I couldn't find it on the website. Were you able to strike a deal? And what was the thinking there? Let me just dominate goalie stats all season here?
I did, and there's a lot of, if you listen to some fantasy-specific podcasts, there's a lot of like 0G strategy, they call it, where you want to not draft goalies super high like I did and just push them off to the end. And then somebody like last year would end up with Brandon Bussey from Carolina, comes from basically out of nowhere, claimed on waivers, and then he kind of did a great thing in the league there. But so I never subscribed to that. Just maybe that's the goalie in me, where I was a goalie for so many years and all that, where I'm not going to do that. And I also overvalue the goalie stats because I think is it 10 offensive stats and then 5 for the goalies or something to that ratio?
It's like
close.
7 and 4 or something like that.
Okay, yeah. So I still overvalue the goalie ones, and I was like, they're most important. And if I get an average week from these guys, their average week, I will do much better than having 2 average goalies that do a little bit better or play above and beyond. So that was just the thing, and that's the other thing too about these are the guys that I'm going to want to watch play. And I think it was and somebody in the league was mad about it because they kind of caught it afterwards. There was Kiefer Sherwood, who can throw a lot of hits. He's going to give you those categories and everything, but not going to give you a whole lot else. And it was maybe before or after, right around the time he was traded to the Sharks. So it was Sherwood and somebody else for Hellebuck. So it was a steal on my end anyway. And when I got that offer to me, I was just like, oh, okay, I'll do that. because we had talked about it, I know, back and forth offline, me and the other person, but yeah, I jumped on that when that opportunity came.
I mean, yeah, we're all grown-ups, we can all make our own trades, and if you're able to pull off a good one, then, more power to you. I got to ask about this, too. Now, you picked 8th this past season. It's a 20-team league, advantages and disadvantages of picking anywhere in the draft. Like, if you pick 1st or 2nd, you can get McDavid and McKinnon, but then you got to wait forever to make your next pick. If you pick 1st, you're also picking 40th. So for you, man, I mean, would you just, given the fact that you won from number 8, like, would you take that again, or do you want to pick early, or would you rather pick a little late and get, back-to-back picks, or what's your thought process there? Yeah.
I like that back-to-back pick if you're the front or the back end of it, especially. But there's always that fall off, and I guess now we include Macklin Celebrini in that top 4 becomes the top 5, and then after that's Pasternak, so it might be 6. You're not going to be upset with anybody, but then you do get to a point where it's a little bit iffy. Because Brady Tkachuk's going to go high in these leagues where we include hits and shots and things like that, But I don't know what those two are going to do in Florida other than record a podcast together. I hope that brings them a little bit down, just because I'm not the biggest Florida fan. But in my main fantasy dynasty league, I have both Tkachuk brothers, so I do root for them, in that capacity. But overall, that real hockey matters a lot more than that. Yeah. I think if I could pick. I think that if we get enough returning people in this league, I would be in favor of you get your draft position based on the previous year. We have to set that established before we start the season for the upcoming year or something like that. But even if we had like 15 out of 20 remaining, anybody that takes over those kind of orphan teams would just have to kind of buy into that, like if we would do something. And if that was the case and I picked 20th, like I'd be fine with that. This year, like I said, it's kind of house money and going forward with it.
Yeah, we could do that, or we could even I don't know how this would work or if everybody would be on top of this, but we could let people in reverse order pick where they want to draft. Like the person who finished last year, okay, where do you want to pick this year? Do you want to pick first?
Yeah.
You want to pick second? That could be interesting. That's something that I'll definitely look into. I think that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Just to throw out, if I had that choice, if I was on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm one of the guys I might take McKinnon over McDavid in a lot of ways. And one factor that, if you get deep in the fantasy hockey weeds, is McKinnon had a better fantasy playoff schedule than McDavid did. He played a couple more games. So if you were in your playoffs, and you would benefit from having McKinnon more so than McDavid. It takes a lot of foresight to look 20 weeks ahead in the schedule to get to that point. Yeah. And they're somewhat comparable, but you're kind of apples to apples at that point. But it's also, you make those little kind of nuanced choices.
Mm-hmm. I've sort of been doing that in my fantasy baseball league because I'm kind of locked into a playoff spot. I can't miss the playoffs, but I also can't get a bye. So I'm looking at pitching matchups for weeks from now. Hopefully it works out there, but we will see. So I figure we'll keep everything rolling. Again, talking with Travis here, the Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy League champion. We will talk a little bit more coming up in just a second about all the Rangers' wheelings and dealings this offseason. I joked on here that it kind of felt like the trade deadline more so than the start of free agency on the day of free agency. But be that as it may, Rangers made a lot of moves. Travis is going to weigh in on it. We'll do all that in just a second. Today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who is hitting a home run today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get your chance to make your prediction before the first pitch. One of the best parts about baseball is that every day brings fresh matchups and new storylines. Daily Dingers gives you another reason to pay attention before that first pitch. So, are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who is hitting a home run. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. All right, so once again, talking with Travis Moul here, the 2025-2026 Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy League champion. And Travis, obviously Rangers making a lot of moves this offseason, which is probably a good thing given the fact that they just finished third to last in the NHL standings. But I wanted to start with kind of the big splash, probably the biggest thing they did all offseason, the trade for Pavel Dorofeyev. They give up a lot to get him, 2 first-rounders and a third. They then sign him for 7 years at $11 million. Do you like this move? Do you think that he's worth, that contract that they gave him?
I do. I mean, you can't compare anybody to Bread, but I think he's a good replacement for Panarin. We had that gap there, that premier offensive player. And one thing in a similar salary in Russian, some connections there. But one thing that we definitely had frustration with Panarin, as great as he was for us all those years, is that he was one of the guys, every time we were yelling shoot at our TVs or at MSG or whatever, he was one of the guys we were yelling at. And I don't think we're going to have that problem with Dorofeyev where he's going to be shooting there at that point. And obviously a younger guy and kind of brings a little bit of a swagger with him. I know from listening, I'm already listening to 20 for dynasty hockey purposes, 2027 draft preparation. And they talk about guys over in the KHL and the MHL, how, if they have that big enough personality in the Russian hockey world that they run the team and the coach just kind of has to go with it. And I think we saw a little bit of that with the Panarin. He's just kind of going to do his own thing. But I think we're going to get a little more straight line, going to the net and trying to score rather than the frustration thing when it didn't work. When it worked, it was great. But, when Panarin would get to the line and just kind of wait at the half boards and wait for everybody else to show up, when he could have maybe gone in, we've seen him in shootouts. He could go in there and handle things if he had the breakaway speed. So I'm hoping some of the negatives that we had with Panarin, which wasn't many, he's great overall and we missed him already, but I'm hoping some of those negatives, we catch up with that and maybe then some with Dorofeyev there.
For sure. Definitely, I'm in big favor of the move as well. And, the contract's pricey. Talked about it before on Locked On Rangers, but I feel like going forward, that's just kind of the going rate for a player like that. If you want to hang on to a young superstar player, you don't have to pony up the dough. And I don't think it's a completely unreasonable cost either. So hopefully it works. I got to ask you about this too. The same night that they trade for Dorofeyev, they also draft Albert Smits at number 5 overall. They passed on some guys that Ranger fans were interested in, Chase Reed, Carson Karls, Vigo Bjork, just to name a few. I still really like the Smits pick. I mean, Chase Reed certainly would give me something to think about, and maybe Bjork too, but just your thoughts on Albert Smits. Did you like the pick, and is there anybody else that you would have liked to see them get there?
Yeah, I did. If we were truly in, and I think you said it on the most recent episode that I listened to earlier today about we truly are in that retool thing. You were talking about all the negatives, coming in that episode about why we're not going to make the playoffs. And I guess there's one coming up where we are going to, but just saying we truly are in that retool rather than the rebuild. And that shows that because he was NHL ready to come in right away, more so than any of the other defensemen that we're going to see, most of which are going to play in college, which, makes you think that, and sometimes they can come straight out of college, but they may need AHL then after that. So they may be 2 years away in that case. And we're going to see Smits at sometime this year. And with him having that size, we don't need the guy to run the power play. We don't need that type of guy to come in with having Fox there. So we need somebody who can actually play defense and help us out with that. But he may have that skill set also. So I love picking him as far as it went with the defenseman. I think down the line that anybody who didn't pick Vigo Bjork may be regretting that, and Winnipeg may have gotten a steal with that one. It sounds like, and I'm 5'3", which is why I say this. A lot of people shy away from the small guy, so I have a spot in my heart for them. But I think that he's really going to be one of those guys where they're going to be like, had he been 6 foot tall, he would have been number 1 overall. He could have taken McKenna's spot there.
Yeah, he maybe more than any other prospect, I think, going into the draft, the buzz around him continued to just build and build and build, and his stock really went up, and you kind of knew he was going to go top 10 overall. I mean, I'm sure the Rangers at least considered it, but to your point, Smits, maybe not quite as high of a ceiling as Bjork, but like you said, he's ready to go here and seems to have a safe floor, and I think he's going to be a heck of a player. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and I feel like we would have brought him in, we would have put him on the 4th line, and buried him down there and with no real established talent. We like some of the exciting guys, the options that we have on the 4th line, but we would have done that. So I think this is going to work out great. I'm with you on that. We should start Albert up in Hartford, though, where he should start up there. And, if he lights it up right away, don't leave him down there too terribly long. But I think that should be the default, unless he just puts us in a spot in camp or there's some injury or trade or something like that where we just have to bring him up. But I think you definitely make him start down there and see how he reacts to that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anything short of him being absolutely phenomenal, maybe there's an injury like you just mentioned, I'd like to see him get a little bit around with the Wolfpack first, just being 18. A move that basically split this fan base completely in half, straight up 50-50, the Vincent Trocheck trade. We've talked about it quite a bit on here. I've said plenty on this, so Travis, man, the floor is all yours. Were you pro trading Trocheck? or were you against it? And how do you feel about the return there?
It was, if we were honest about retooling the team, that had to happen, I think, with as long as we got some sort of return. And that's one time will tell on the guys that we get back there. Jersey, we're going to see right away. But Cole Bolduin will be the big part with that. But I think it had to happen, just kind of moving on, kind of changing the core. We have some great memories to go on with him. I actually have this Ranger calendar. You can't see it on here, but I'm pointing at it, where it has each month it has a different Ranger player. And he was on. It just seems like they knew when they made this thing pre-2026, who was going to get traded. He was in June. And I remember when I flipped to June, I was like, well, I hope he makes it through the month. And he did. He got traded like at the very beginning of July then. I guess it was. But they had like Panarin in February. He got traded in February. They had Sam Carrick, of all people in this calendar, got traded in March, but that was his month in there. So Igor's in December. I hope we don't trade him foolishly in December, but his calendar like portends bad things. But yeah, as far as Trocheck, I think kind of had to happen. And you really, when you nailed this home in a lot of the podcasts, just saying that, he's not playing with Panarin anymore and he's not getting any older. We can't put him with anybody like Panarin. He could have certainly had a role on the team. And if for some reason it didn't happen, I'd find a way to be happy about it, have like a Mr. Brightside kind of attitude. But I think overall, if it was me in Drury's seat, and how could we do any worse? I think just be like, I would pull the trigger on that deal if that was presented to me. I'd love to know with these deals, like who made the call first. Is it like Utah calling, or is it him like scrambling around to find somebody? Like the word was out that we were willing to deal the guy, but I like to see how these things work. Like where's the initiation on the phone calls?
I would love that. There was actually a video that got posted to social media. I was kind of surprised that, I don't know if it was the Rangers that shared it or the Blue Jackets, but it was the trade a couple of years ago where the Rangers acquired Jack Roslovic of all things.
Yeah.
And like, it was, I don't know if you saw it. It was like posted, like Drury, like on the phone with John Davidson, like with the Jackets, and like, them kind of haggling over what the return was going to be. It ended up only being a 4th rounder, but yeah, man. I mean, to be a fly on the wall, right, for some of these meetings, behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, that would be super interesting.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Jersey. Got to ask you about this like revamped Ranger blue line here. Obviously, Jersey is part of it. Rangers also giving up a 1st rounder, I think in like 2030 for Marcus Pettersson. I'm feeling better about this blue line than I had the last couple of seasons. But what are your thoughts on it overall? Like, do you think this is an improved group for this Ranger team?
Yeah, I think it takes you back to a couple of years ago when we had Fox and Lindy, and then Trouba with oh man, why am I blanking? Who we get?
Miller, was it? Trouba and Miller.
Yeah, Miller. When we had that kind of like core 4, and they were established as like the top 4, and then you could kind of rotate in and out but at least we had that now, where that's not kind of, are we pushing Schneider up to there, and Borgen kind of, I liked Borgen when he was around, kind of out of place, on that second pair, more of a third pair kind of guy. So I like that this gives us like that core 4, and even if we have Schneider hanging around, and and when Smits comes up, like they know they're going to kind of have that role until they, Smits in his case hopefully earns his role moving up over the years and everything. But that's good, and the defensive mindedness coming first, especially with a guy like Pettersson. I like that. That's going to be helpful, because our problem, wasn't, sometimes we were allowing more goals, but the problem was just not scoring goals. But but that all helps on the back end. It'll push forward to where the offensive guys can kind of relieve a little pressure and do their thing up front then.
Absolutely. And got to ask you about this one too. Oliver Bjorkstrand, not as much like hype and fanfare as some of the other moves that the Rangers made this offseason. It's just a 1-year deal. It felt a little random to me, and he wasn't like at the top of my list, but like I don't hate it either. I'm kind of like on the fence. Oliver Bjorkstrand, do you like this move? How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I do. But if we could find something different, like Patrick Laine, if he's still available for $1 million or something like that, something we don't have to break the bank on, some bonus laden thing. And I'm not sure why he's still out there. Like maybe I'd like that a little bit more. Somebody to pure shooter, but he's a shooter. He can score some goals. He had a little bit of a down year last year to Bjorkstrand, but he's also coming from Tampa, and those guys just know how to win, even though they didn't advance as far in the playoffs as they had in previous years. So it brings some of that winning mentality and mindset, because it seems like a lot of the people we get coming in come from teams where they're struggling also, make these deals with San Jose and Anaheim and things like that, where they're kind of maybe up and coming or have some things. But so coming from that Tampa mentality might be a good thing. And he's been around the league. He knows what to do. And I think that he'd also, I don't obviously know the guy personally or very well, but I think that he would be okay if he gets pushed down to like that third line, especially if he's not performing or anything like that. He doesn't have that mentality of, I have to be up at the top, if he's not earning it.
Gotcha. So we'll keep everything rolling just a minute. You mentioned the line combinations. You mentioned Bjorkstrand maybe playing on the third line. We're going to get to that in a second. I do want to ask you about, your ideal line combinations. We'll get to that in just a minute. Also going to talk a little bit about Mike Sullivan, Chris Drury, some predictions, all that good stuff in just a second here on Locked On New York Rangers. All right, we'll go ahead and keep everything rolling here. Travis, I got to know, man, like line combinations. Is there like somebody you want to see with somebody or like do you want to keep like Mika and Gabe and Lafreniere all together? Just any general thoughts on how the Rangers should look to line up maybe on opening night this year?
The bottom line is I want it to work and to figure it out early. I just read again recently, like it reminded myself painfully how much we struggled at home and struggled to score goals. We got goalied in so many games early in the year, and that kind of set the tone for everything, and then just couldn't win an MSG, and I kind of blocked that out of my head, so whatever makes that not happen again. But I think the main thing Sullivan and his team has to do is just they have to center that around Mika and make sure that he knows that, he's the number one center, so that makes sense to do, but not make it more about who is Mika going to play with, and if that's Perreault and Laf again, then that's great. I would like to see that maybe as the default, try that first. But I don't want them to say, like, with Dorofeyev here, we're going to see what works best for him, or have him, again, I don't know the personality. I don't want him to come in and be like, I need to be on the top line or anything like that, since he's coming from Vegas where he was more, kind of could be that fourth or fifth guy. Now he's going to be the guy. He can be the guy on our second line. He's going to be top power play regardless. So I think you just build everything around Mika and try the line that was working so well at the end of last year first, and that'll put Dorofeyev and JT on that second line with probably Bjorkstrand, and if Cooley can push his way up there, then, I think Bjorkstrand and Cooley could be interchangeable as far as that goes. I do like Cartier. I like the energy that he brings, and that could work on like a third line, or fourth line.
Yeah. The third line could be fun this year because we're talking It might be Cartier, Laba, and maybe Cooley is there with them. And, that's a speedy, hard-hitting, like hard-working kind of line. And, I don't know that they'll score a ton of goals, but they should be able to chip in, at least from time to time there, I would think.
Yeah, and I'd like to see Rempe stick around on the fourth line because he can be that 13th guy and not dress every single day. I think he brings a lot. Like you said, we're playing these Tom Wilson games or, we're going to reignite the rivalry with somebody like the Islanders or something like that. Kind of more on the up-and-coming side, like kind of just put him out there. So I think that he still could have a great purpose on the team. You're always seeing the rumors lately about Shane Wright coming, and he's a pure center. I could, I don't know if Lava ever played any wing, but with his speed and having relatively good speed on the team and he has some offensive power. You could put him on a wing on like the third line, I think, if you had to move him over or push him down to 4. If we could make a deal, that would be reasonable coming in. I don't know if that's still in the works or anything as we approach the season, but
yeah, his name pops up every once in a while. It's interesting because it could be a little bit of a buy low opportunity there for the Rangers, and it would kind of fit the retooling with them wanting to get younger. The concern I have is he just hasn't done a whole lot, and it's just we can't get our own prospects together, right? We're going to try to fix somebody else's, right? But I do see some merit in trying to buy low there for sure.
It could just be a change of scenery kind of thing. One of my best friends is from Seattle, and he said, you almost forget about that the Kraken are there. He doesn't live there anymore. He's in the Navy still, so he lives down in Norfolk. But he says, he just forgets about the Kraken sometimes and that they're going on. So that's not a big hockey town. It hasn't latched on. It seems like it'd be a great spot to go watch a game every time you see him on there and everything. So, and Shane Wright has that chip on his shoulder about he thought he was going to be drafted number 1 and fell to 4, and then he ends up in Seattle of all places, which is probably no kid's dream to go. That's not, top destinations to go. So I think if you could put him on a bigger stage, it may ignite him. I thought the same thing, not the bigger stage part, but the change of scenery with Lafreniere all the years. But every time we think he's struggling, it's like he's going to go somewhere else and he's going to blow up, or at least kind of get closer to his potential. And when he struggles this year, we're all going to say that too. Like, is it time to trade him? And with that,
that's like the ultimate catch-22 situation with Lafreniere there, because when he's going bad, that's when we're all like, oh my God, get rid of this guy, trade him. But like, you're not going to get anything for him. Then when he picks it up, it's like, all right, well, maybe we hang on to him. But if you want to trade him, that's the time to do it. Like, it's a tough situation. Would you stay the course with Lafreniere, or are you open to deal him if that were to come up?
I would definitely stay the course with him. When I met my wife, and I had an Igor jersey at the time, she's like, I want a Ranger jersey. And I ordered a Loft jersey for her, and we actually got a Panarin sent to us, which is still applicable at the time because it was a couple years ago. But then I wrote back and I was like, this is not what I wanted. And, and I wasn't willing to send it back though. So I just ordered a second one and got it locked for a year. So I wanted that, knowing he's going to be here for the long haul. And I'd rather just ride the waves with him and see where it goes. He's going to be inconsistent, and Kreider was too, all those years that he was here. He had so many ups and downs. And as long as we can kind of embrace that, you got to get that number 1 draft pick. That's 6 years ago now. You got to get that, that is his pedigree and everything, but out of the head. But just if we can get out of him what we've gotten out of him last year, maybe more consistency would be great. I would like that, but I wouldn't move him, without somebody overpaying for him at this point.
That makes sense. I do have to ask you about Mike Sullivan. Obviously, year 1 didn't really go as planned. It ended up being kind of like a transitional year for the Rangers, but I mean, he's there now. They know him. Hopefully they know his system a little bit better. Do you feel good about, Mike Sullivan going forward with this Ranger team?
Yeah, and I think that him being in his second year, even though he's an experienced guy and has all the international experience as well as, Stanley Cups and everything, he did hit the ground running in Pittsburgh and did not here. So, and I think he's enough of a professional where he's going to find a way to change that and what needs to be changed and everything. But still sticking with his system that has proven to work over the years. Maybe brought some players in, Pettersson specifically, that's going to be this guy fits, and he got one of his guys. So, yeah, I'm really rooting for him, obviously, and hoping that things go well. I don't like the idea of changing coaches every 2 years because, where's that deal? It's great when we have those great first years, but then the second year falls off. So maybe this will be in reverse. And I feel like over the last 4 or 5 years or so, the Rangers have almost done the opposite of what not just us, the fans, but the experts kind of picked them to do. It's like, oh, they struggled and then it come from out of nowhere. And, then we win the President's Trophy and then we won the President's Trophy. It's like, all right, great. Well, how are we going to bring this back? And then you struggle. Well, we can't do that bad again. And we did worse, so we have nowhere to go except for up now, unless we and the draft, the lottery just screwed us this time. It was the revenge of the Lafreniere. It balanced that out over this decade or whatever. But yeah, so nowhere to go but up as far as that goes. But as far as Sullivan and everything, and his team, I'm all in on that. Let's see what happens there, and be patient with them because we're on that playoff. We're all talking about the playoff. Are we going to make it or not? So that's where the team's basically at. Like, are we going to make it? And if we get close, but improve from this year, and that's a win. I'd like to definitely get in and make some noise there. But yeah, so I'm in for Sully.
Yeah, I mean, you get in, you never know what can happen. I mean, do I look at this Ranger team and think like they're going to eat their way in and go on some rampage in the playoffs? Not necessarily, but we've seen teams do it. Teams that barely get into the playoffs, they, go on these long runs. I mean, the Kings won the cup as an 8 seed. Even when the Rangers won the cup, they were playing the Canucks. They were a 7 seed. So you never know for sure. Get in and take your chances.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about Drury? I mean, he has taken an absolute beating from Ranger fans. And I do think his tenure is not quite as much of a train wreck as it gets made into, although the last couple of years have been kind of rough. Just your thoughts on Drury and how he's done here.
I would love to find out, and this could be down the road in somebody's book or something like that. I would love for Dolan to have told him that we find out this is your last coach you're hiring. So pick what, if you want Sullivan, I'll get Sullivan. Like, I would love that because there should be some living on, if you're the one hiring the coaches and that's not working out, then the problem is you potentially. So I want it to work out. I had that, like I said, that Mr. Brightside kind of optimism, and I want it to work out with Drury, with the people we have in place right now. But, if that doesn't, then there's somebody else kind of waiting in the wings to come back. Maybe Mike Greer seems to be doing a great job there in San Jose. He could come back, and do something, or if somebody else wants to step up to the plate. But totally pulling for the team to come together. I feel like he's made some great moves over the past couple months. I'm feeling good about everything. Time will tell how it all works out, but we have to remember how we're feeling about it now and not making a bunch of bad decisions. And the whole hockey world's going to center around Connor McDavid and everything. And, I'm sure he'll take a swing at that. We may never know about it or anything and how that's going to fit under the cap and everything. So if he makes it that far, that'll be the big test for every single GM in the league. And as far as that's going to go.
For sure. That is going to be something to watch in a couple of years when Connor McDavid makes it to free agency. And like you said, I mean, I'm sure the Rangers will be in on him, but I think if they're going to have even a prayer of landing him, they've got to improve this. Maybe that's part of the idea behind this retooling is you can't put everything on hold just for Connor McDavid, but you make this team a little bit better. You at least get them moving in the right direction. And then you at least have a chance to land McDavid. I mean, do you think something like that could be going on?
Yeah, and I think it's going to come down to, does he want to play in New York? Some guys do and some guys do not. And if he's going to go wherever he wants to go, and I think he could still be the highest paid player and potentially leave money on the table. Although I think they're going to say, here's 20% of the cap and it's yours. But I think multiple teams are going to do that. He's going to have his ability to do that. And he won't be the last one. That's going to continue to happen as the cap continues to rise and these contracts get kind of out of control. And then we'll be smiling here saying Dorofeyev's only making $11 million. Like, we're great.
That's how it goes, man. This stuff goes in cycles. Before you know it, Dorofeyev will be a bargain.
Yeah.
So, but gotta ask you about the Rangers captain too, JT Miller. Really came under fire from some Ranger fans, myself included. I didn't always have the nicest things to say about JT Miller on this podcast last season, but he was seemingly dealing with an injury. Do you think he can basically pull a Mika and bounce back this upcoming season? How are you feeling about JT?
I think he can, and I think that he definitely has more of that fire in his belly that we were missing all those years. Trouba had it to some degree, but JT definitely has a little bit more with that. So it's in there, and I hope that can come out. And maybe behind the scenes, it's being a little more honest than he was then, saying he's injured and struggling with everything. But I'd really like to see a little bit more of that snarl. I think Fox balances that out where he has none of that whatsoever. No kind of mean streak. And I love Fox, and I wouldn't trade him for of course Kale McCarr comes across the table or something like that. But
right.
But I hate the one thing I hated the most watching all the losses. I get it, teams are going to lose, you're going to get goals scored against and everything like that. But I hated Fox's body language, especially when he was on the ice, he just look up, and everything like that. And I was like, man, that one's on you. Like you're part of the problem out there. So do whatever you got to do to fix that. So I'm hoping, and that's just more the mental thing, I mean, goalies always talk about getting mental coaches and everything like that. Maybe if Fox went to Harvard, so I'm not going to second guess the dude or anything, but maybe he just needs something to kind of just, hey, if you don't do that, that shows the younger defensemen coming up and the other guys we put around you, that shows Smits when he's there on the team that, you're going to let some things go, but keep your head held high and move forward with it, not just kind of give up then.
It's funny you mention that because honestly, with Adam Fox, that's maybe the one thing he does that I don't like. I don't know if you've seen lately, the NHL Network, they did their top 20 defenseman, right? He was only number 13. I thought that was ridiculous. I thought he should have been higher than that. But people claim that he can't play defense. And it's dude, every eye test and every metric says he's an elite defensive defenseman. But I didn't see anyone criticize him for that. And that's the one thing, because you're right. That's not a good example to set. He's wearing a letter. Mm-hmm. He's by far the longest tenured New York Ranger defenseman. He's one of the older Ranger defensemen. Yep. You can't be doing this every time your team gives up a goal, right? So that's the one thing that I actually might take aim at Fox for. Yeah,
just that kind of mindset and the perception of how that looks there. And we know those defenseman metrics never measure their actual defense that they get. Those guys are going to be on the waiver wire in fantasy, and you can pick them up for a game and get a couple hits and blocks. The defensemen. They're very unexciting, to the casual viewer or anything like that. Great to have, but that's just not who the top defensemen are ever going to be. I think that we as a team got away from, and Keandre was doing a lot of this. I can picture him doing it more than anybody. That sprawling out. You've addressed on the podcast. Sprawl out and lay down and just spread everything out and hope these NHL players can't pass the puck, over top of your body to the next guy. Just kind of blocking that lane. I think we got away from that a little bit as a team.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was a coaching decision or somebody just said, hey, this is not working out. This is,
Well, they would do what you just said, or they would wait for the defenseman to just slide across the ice and move out of the way.
Yeah.
And now there's no one in the way, and it's a 2-on-none, and Igor's got to stand on his head to make a save. That was driving me crazy 2 seasons ago. But to your point, Travis, I do think they got away from that at least a little bit this past season. So that's positive. Talking about Ranger defense, and there's one more that I got to ask you about. Braden Schneider, subject of a lot of trade rumors, it feels like for, honestly, about 2 years now, but he is back with the team on a 1-year deal, $5.5 million. Would you have liked to have seen him traded for something that the Rangers needed, or are you good with Schneider being back, for the short term for the time being here?
I'm good for the short term, keeping him back because it's a relatively cheap deal. It's getting a little bit up there. But it's just the 1-year thing. And then I guess he still has arbitration rights. So we're going to do this all again next season if we don't trade him between now and then. But that's great. This still gives us some leverage there. It's just that 1-year thing. And it makes him somewhat tradable in some cases to where we can send somebody out and, he can figure it out. But I'm assuming they tried to trade him and there wasn't a good offer back. And that's some of the things where all the flack we're going to give Drury. We may never know these things or may not know until well after the fact that, he maybe had some offers in there and he was like, it just wasn't good enough for that to come in. So you just never know. But I'm good having him there, we can transpose some of these guys as far as right and left. But when Smits is ready to come up, I don't want anybody to block him or anybody for that matter if they're fighting Fortescue for that matter. If they prove and what are they? If we start looking at these numbers in Hartford, like why is this guy still down there? I don't want somebody to block him coming up. But I think it's a good move for what we have right now. He brings some of that toughness. We called him Baby Trouba all those years that we need that grit. He's not going to be afraid to get in there. And if he's in this thing where he's approaching that unrestricted free agency. I don't know if sports guys always do it, but you see that contract year kind of mentality where I'm playing for the money now. And if he can step up his game in any way and impress us, then great. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And, to your point, too, I feel like with Schneider, they kind of see him as like the stopgap option for right now, which is why he's only on a 1-year deal. Because, you mentioned Fortescue. Smits, like you said, I mean, he's going to be there sooner or later this upcoming season.
Yeah.
I just don't know. And now the top 4 is a little bit more fortified than it was. Like, are they really going to pay Schneider like $6 million a season for 5 years? Like, it just, I can't see it going that way. And I know Schneider has his fans, he has his naysayers, but feels like he might not be long for the Rangers.
Yeah. Yeah, and it depends on what the return is. If I log on tomorrow and see that we traded him, and that's going to be my first question, like, what would we get back? Mm-hmm. What do we have coming? Because it shouldn't be draft picks at this point. We're still trying to get back into winning mode right now.
Absolutely. So I figured, Travis, this is a ton of fun, man. We got to end with one very all-important question, and that is, do the Rangers make the playoffs in 2026, 2027? What do you got?
I'll say yes. Yeah. And it may not even just be a wild card because, like you pointed out recently, the Metro's a little bit kind of potentially shaky. None of these teams strike fear in heart except for Carolina. And I feel like we have that ability to kind of, even just with Igor alone, but if healthy Igor, if everybody stays the course and does what they can do, we could really make some noise there. Nothing would surprise me, but I'll say yes, we get in.
Yeah, there's there, like you said, man, there's no real team in the Metro other than the Canes that I really think is like all that scary or like light years beyond the Rangers. I mean, like the Penguins, okay, they had a good season last year, but was that kind of like their last run with that core? And you've got teams like the other 2 local teams, the Islanders and Devils, they didn't impress anybody this past season. And even the Caps, I know a lot of people are like big on them right now, but I mean, they always tend to underachieve other than a couple of years ago when they won the division. So
and super obviously interesting, and this is why we watch, but I think at the end of the season we're going to be happy.
Absolutely. So Ranger fans, thank you guys as always for tuning in. Travis, this is a ton of fun, man. Best of luck in the fantasy season. Congrats again on the win. And what else is there to say, man? Let's go Rangers. Let's have some fun this season.
Let's go. Thanks.
Absolutely. So all right, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sean.